Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. I decided to include this brief little short before the video that I already recorded to take a moment to say that while I was basically all but gone for many months, I am slowly making my way back towards regular content. However, because of the long periods of absences, my channel has been severely hindered as a result of that. So I'd like to ask everyone, if you find value in these videos, please remember to like, share, subscribe, do all the things, because I am trying to revitalize my channel and every little bit helps. So please do what you can if you enjoy the content. Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and Electronic Arts surprises no one yet again by being outed as deliberately pushing loot box gambling on its player base. Now, it feels like it's been an absolute eternity that the ongoing conflict surrounding loot boxes and their gambling addictiveness properties has been waged, with companies like Electronic Arts being at the very center of that debate. Now, we all know that Electronic Arts earns billions of dollars every single year strictly from loot boxes, and we also know that Electronic Arts does utilize manipulative tactics to push their players into engaging with loot boxes within their games. We saw this back during the excessively anti-consumer monetization of Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA, which sparked a massive online outrage. However, it is and has been even more prevalent within EA Sports titles, chief among them being FIFA and that game's loot box trading card mechanic, FIFA Ultimate Team. However, up until this point, Electronic Arts has maintained a stance of semi-plausible deniability and feigning willful ignorance in their desires to push loot boxes on their players. But the inevitable finally occurred this morning when CBC News released an article titled "Video Game Giant EA Steering Players into Loot Box Option in Popular Soccer Game Insider Says," where an EA insider released internal documents that clearly showed EA's intent with FIFA Ultimate Team. While they stated this was a 54-page leaked document, CBC News only released a couple of pages that appears to have been configured for a slideshow or PowerPoint presentation. Within the pages that were shown, a couple of lines stand out. The first is under the 5 Things You Need to Know page, where EA states they have more active players than ever and that the team will be, quote, squarely focused on engaging current players, along with players being actively messaged and incentivized to convert, although it's uncertain what they mean by conversion, likely converting to the new release of FIFA or converting from standard FIFA to actively utilizing FIFA Ultimate Team, where they then state, quote, FIFA Ultimate Team is the cornerstone and we are doing everything we can to drive players there. Likely meaning the cornerstone of all this active messaging and incentivization is specifically to direct people to FIFA Ultimate Team. This is further reinforced by the next slide, where they state, all roads lead to FIFA Ultimate Team. Content teasers plus targeted Aruba messaging will drive excitement and funnel players towards FIFA Ultimate Team from other modes. As I said, to date, Electronic Arts has publicly refuted any allegations that they attempt to push people into loot boxes, a stance that many, including myself, believe to be patently false. The CBC article continues to state, an EA spokesperson declined an interview request and wouldn't comment on the document, which he noted was marked privileged and confidential, other than to say it is being viewed without context and that interpretation of what it says are misinformed. When asked to clarify, he did not respond. Again, regurgitating the usual company line, public relations representative Charlie Fortescue is quoted as saying, all EA games can be played without spending on in-game items, and the majority of players do not spend. Now, we've heard that same tired old line from Electronic Arts in particular for far too long. It is well known, particularly among free-to-play games, that the vast number of players will never spend a dime on microtransactions or loot boxes. This is where the term whales comes into play. Of the remaining number of players that do engage with those purchases, only a small percentage spend large quantities of money. Manipulation tactics surrounding loot boxes are injected into the system in order to maximize the number of whales currently pumping money into the game. After all, think about it. It's really not difficult at all to spend $50 or even $100 on Ultimate Team Packs. If one person does that each month, that would result in an annual spend of $600 to $1,200 from that one person alone. Multiply that by tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of players, and those numbers go pretty fast, especially considering somewhere between 3 and 7% of those players will be spending 10 or even 100 times that amount, if not more. And that argument that people don't have to engage is defense by deflection, which is a common tactic with Electronic Arts. In addition to all this, CBC News reports the insider provided a second, shorter internal document referring to in-game currency as grind currency, where they write, "Grinding in video games is slang for doing the same monotonous task over and over again to the point where it's no longer fun," said the insider. "It seems like EA games are designed to be boring, to be a grind, and to encourage people of all ages to spend money on card packs." He says the company has always emphasized that the Ultimate Team mode is optional and that players don't have to use real money for loot boxes. So he says he was shocked to see the industry giant acknowledge that it's doing everything it can to steer players into the mode. For years, they've been able to act with a layer of plausible deniability, the insider said. Yet in their internal documents, they're saying, "This is our goal. We want people driven to the card pack mode." Which, this is important to note, and I can't stress this enough. For years, many of us have stated with confidence that the successful nature of the income generated from loot boxes have caused the AAA games industry to impose grind in order to frustrate players into purchasing loot boxes to make the game more palatable. We've seen this concept of imposed grind most notably evidenced in recent days with Assassin's Creed, where they offer out of the gate a 50% XP boost, where once the XP boost is applied, the game feels more natural to play in terms of progression. But as with everything within the AAA industry, most notably Electronic Arts, they will first arbitrarily create a lack or a scarcity, or perhaps one was evident and the game designers at the time weren't necessarily aware of it, although the former is far more likely than the latter. They'll then introduce a solution by way of paid microtransactions, which are in fact macrotransactions, as many purchases are valued at a significant portion of the asking price for the entire game, sometimes more than the actual cost of the game itself. They then branch out on this concept with in-game premium currency, where they also impose the hot dog versus bun issue, where the hot dogs come in packages of 10, but hot dog buns come in packages of 8. So you end up buying more buns than you need. With in-game premium currency, they maximize your spend by pushing you into a situation where you're required to purchase more than you need in order to get that one item that you want, leaving you with leftover in-game currency, which then also creates a desire to spend that remaining currency, which builds a feedback loop cycle of spending. They then iterate to the next phase up and place that same arbitrarily created form or lack of scarcity and place that within the shell game slot machine that are loot boxes, creating gambling interactions in order to obtain the items you want and hoping that those interactions will suck you into buying more and more loot boxes. And judging from the billions they rake in every single year just from loot boxes, their methods are highly effective. But they're also highly dangerous for a couple of very specific reasons. The first is that they do alter the overall design structure of the games that they're being placed into, again through arbitrarily imposed lack or scarcity. And in terms of video games, I am a bit of a purist. Deliberately designing or altering a game just in order to be able to inject excessive monetization is wrong in my eyes. The second is that loot boxes themselves do appear to be capable of triggering addictive behaviors within those opening loot boxes. Again, a slot machine is at its core a slot machine. And all of it merely in order to ramp up profit growth to be able to appease investors, accumulating undue wealth at the expense of susceptible personality types and through deliberate manipulation of their player base. The article continued on to discuss David Zendel, a gaming researcher at the University of York, where they write, Zendel is one of the world's leading researchers on loot boxes. He's conducted several studies involving thousands of participants who play video games. Every single time we look for it, we find the same relationship, he said. The people who spend heavily on loot boxes tend to have high levels of problem gambling. What the research doesn't tell him is whether problem gamblers are drawn to loot boxes or whether loot boxes are creating problem gamblers. Zendel says to figure that out, he and other researchers need video game giants to be more transparent about the data they collect. Who are they, the top players, asked Zendel. How much are they spending? These are the basic questions that we can't answer because the industry is not sharing this data. And one must first ask the question, why would the industry that is greatly enriching themselves off of the back of loot boxes ever be willing to share this data? Well, the short answer is they wouldn't. Of course they wouldn't. That would be like taking the goose that lays the golden eggs and while it is producing just fine, taking it out back and shooting it, then delivering the corpse to some random individual to be able to consume it for food. The industry will never be willing to part with that data, and the only way to get it would be either through illegal means or through some form of lawsuit or government intervention. And once upon a time, merely a few years back, there was an argument being made as to whether or not some video games could be considered a form of art. After all, books can be, as can movies, so why not video games? Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, Journey, and so many others were touted as potentially being an art form within video games, and those games are lauded as being truly phenomenal gameplay experiences. Now, imagine those games being injected with the AAA industry's formula of microtransactions and loot boxes. Would anyone still be able to make the case for those games being a work of art? Likely not. Of course, the AAA industry does not, nor have they ever legitimately cared for the creative aspects and nature of video games. They care about profit, all else be damned, like any other corporation you might see in the world. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with profit. There's nothing wrong with enriching yourself for creating a product that people will want to buy. The problem I have is with undue wealth accumulation based solely upon manipulation tactics and unregulated forms of gambling, which I still firmly believe loot boxes are. And the more studies that are done, the more the academic literature agrees with the assessments of myself and a great many others. Because loot boxes don't provide anything outside of what you would get from a slot machine in Vegas, while lacking all regulation to help prevent the system from being completely against the player. And that is something we need. If we're going to have gambling in video games, we should have gambling regulations to go along with them to help protect the consumer, to help protect the player from undue manipulation and undue control of the game's companies. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.